to Matt Benaco to be the host for this session. And I'd just like to welcome everyone for this interesting session. As I posted on LinkedIn, as well as in the Google group, I think FME combination with API is very potent. And it's certainly very important given the current computing landscape we are in. And we'll keep having people coming in, great. And perhaps, hey, Matthew, if you can, or Brian, if you can admit them, that would be great. I think you can.
Yep.
You can. Okay. So, yeah. So I think today, again, we're fortunate to have people from Connected DOT, Jeremy. I tend to say Desimone, but again, I will leave that for Matthew to introduce. And one of the things that Eric Abram, and he usually is the host, and he last minute who couldn't attend, so he asked me to welcome you to this session. And with that, I'm handing over to Matthew, and he has a few slides to introduce the speakers, and then we'll go from there.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Bo. So here, just to introduce myself, it's, Matt Benaco. I work at the Connecticut Department of Transportation, currently a transportation planner. I have been working in FME for the last few years now, and every day learning a little bit more. Our presenter today is Jeremy. Jeremy used to be in my unit of roadway inventory here in Connecticut, and now he is a part of the Enterprise GIS unit. And he has taught me a lot about FME. And nowadays, it's every week we're kind of going back and forth on learning from each other. So one thing that Jeremy has been great with is using APIs with FME. It's something we've been trying to introduce, and he's been able to find some success with it. So it's a great presentation for everyone to see. So for Jeremy, a little background on him. He worked with us in roadway inventories in the Aegis group now. Prior to coming to Connecticut, he was in Colorado, and he was doing consultant work for a GIS group. So he's been doing this for quite some time. And Brian, I think you can go to the next slide now. Okay. So as you can see, just background and purpose. The whole purpose of the FME-T and FME is just to crowdsource knowledge and resources for the betterment of the GIST community. And we're hoping that presentations like these can bring in more members and share the knowledge that we have on FME for everyone. And just to introduce Jeremy before he takes over, his least favorite fruit I can agree with completely, which is coconut. And I did have a placeholder in here as his favorite FME transformer, which is a question we ask all our presenters. I put in attribute manager. That is my favorite. I know that's a consensus here in Connecticut, but maybe after this presentation, he might have a different answer. So I think from here, Jeremy, we can have you share your screen and get started.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. Let me see if I could share this. Can everyone see my form, as we now call it here?
Yeah, yes, we can, Jeremy. Thank you.
Sweet.
Hey, Jeremy, we can see it, but I think the it's pretty small, so perhaps some point you need to blow that up to make it a little more visible.
Yep, I was gonna kind of zoom in and out. Does that help a little bit?
Yep, definitely. Maybe a little more in, and then you're good to go.
Sweet.
Thanks, Chair.
No problem. So yeah, like Matt said, my background is more GIS based, and Esri side of Arc Pro and desktop. But here at the DOT, I've kind of gone headfirst into the FME world, and very useful tool along with enterprise GIS, Esri, and server API calls to our portal and so on. But with this flow, I was asked to do an API call to Bentley and their API on their end, mainly InspecTech, which is a field collection model and platform that is used in our engineering side of things, especially for bridge data. So I was having some issues because it is might be a little small down here, but it's a paginated call to their API, making it a lot harder to deal with than just a regular API call and then a simple JSON extraction. So we had to get some help directly from Safe Software themselves. Dave, probably gonna mess up his last name, so I apologize, Dave, even though he's not here. Campanis helped Matt and I out on a call one day to really parse this data out even deeper. So it's a series of API calls. If I zoom out too far, just interrupt me and let me know. But it's a series of API calls and JSON extractors coming through two avenues. One avenue up here on the top of the form to create drag this out if I can see it. A get call to the API. There was a weird caveat on the Bentley side of things that even though it's a get data call, we could see here in the URL, it needed to be a post method within FME and then have the authentication through a login provided me by our engineer team. So that the top part of this form, as we start to get into the extraction side of things, is to get what they call bridge load data and the vehicle that they use for that bridge load data, how they measure it, and so on. So in the first kind of part of this, it's an extraction to get the data, get the page numbering, and so on within the response body and pull that into this requesting page field. After that, we do another JSON extractor to really extract out our start in totals. This is actually a dynamic total. When I first started this, it was about 65,000 records. Now we're up to 72. So that's key in the cloner where we copy 1,000 assets or 1,000 entries per request, as we can see here. Let me zoom in a little bit closer so you can see it. And that essentially just copies the call 1,000 times over to get to that 72,000 number. A little tough to see because it all looks the same, but essentially it's just this copy number field, which is what we're worried about over here in our value. Because from there, the attribute creator will then go ahead, create the page number, and create a multi-line call here saying, multiply that copy number by 1,000 until the remaining is 0. So if we go back one step, or I guess we can see it here, this remaining number becomes 0. So we essentially run through all those pages. I see a chat here. I will try to monitor this. What is the data source for bridge again? Bentley suites. Matt could probably talk a little bit better to that than I can, but they run our LRS system with XOR. They handle our data collection as far in the engineering with InspecTech. So you could kind of see that here in our CTDOT IT API, Bentley.com. So kind of a custom API. Bentley provides us with a touching point to produce the different types of calls we need. So kind of go back a step, right? So we're creating our multi-line and creating our page numbers through the extraction attribute creator. And then within our attribute keeper, just anything that we want to keep with our attributes. And I don't know why this is blank now. Weird. Well, maybe I have some review to do. And then I inserted a sampler just because there are so many calls. In order to test this at a usable level, I need to, limit the amount of calls going on. This could run for, an hour making the 73 calls and parsing out all that data. So once we have our sampler, or once we get our attribute keeper, sorry. So kind of eliminate the sampler in the main flow once this is in production. We come through and do essentially the same get call with the same credentials, but we are hitting a different upload body in the page number, which was created by this attribute creator. It's a little tougher to see, but essentially the same thing I was saying before. Your start's 0, your count's 1,000, and it's going to go through till the remaining is 0. And then kind of disable this. That's no longer in use. We go down to JSON fragmenter again and pull out the attributes we want to expose and flatten within our JSON query of data. From the previous extraction, this HTTP caller. If we go to our page or response body, we have data. So it's kind of a weird. Pagination is a little weird. I'm very new to it, so I'm probably explaining it pretty badly. But essentially, we have, if it's true, this is our requesting page. And then within that, after we have the start 0 next to 1,000 records, so on, we have the actual data that we want to parse out. So we call that in through here, JSON fragmenter then extracts that out through the data call, saying this is our attribute we want. Goes through a feature joiner that joins to what is our actual bridge data down here. These are, bridge numbers, where they're located, and the attributed details on that. Essentially the same API call, it's just an asset though. Pretty simple. Get the response body again, and then similar extractors. I won't dive too deep into this because essentially it's just the same thing as up top, just a different get call, but same value, so on. Page native data, all that. So then once we have our feature joiner, we will join based on ASID, which is the bridge number. So in our inspection data up top with our 71,000 records, they have their bridge number, and then that will tie back to the bridge number and the actual bridge data. We have our attribute creator. So if we look at the joined data and kind of slide over here. There's two fields we're worried about. It says TM name and value. There's a load rating factor, which has a value, and a load rating vehicle for that created this value in this factor. We want that to read as one line. So this is the same inspection record for bridge 06200A, TI order 1, and so on, that we can tell as a TI ID that they share. So it was asked that I make this into one record per inspection instead of two, which for our database maintenance side and Esri users, will help our number of records greatly. It's going to obviously cut that in half. So the attribute creator will create those field values and a PK for a join. Attribute manager will go ahead and populate that through conditionals, which Matt helped me out a lot on based on his experience in roadway and looking at previous and next values in a table. So if I go in here, attribute has a value, and then we need to say this one equals TM name, so load rating vehicle. After that, we have a sorter, so they're in order by PK. So down here, we can see that we now have our load rating factor, vehicle type, and a PK value based on several different lines in here. So essentially this equals that. Let's sort on that so that in our next attribute manager, where Matt helped me out, we can say we enable adjacent feature attributes of a priority of 1 and a subsequent feature of 1. And we can go in here and say if feature +1, so the next feature in the table, has a value, then this vehicle type will equal the vehicle type in the next line. Basically, the issue here in the paginated data, in the way our inspect tech data is set up, unfortunately, since it was 2 lines previously, like this, we broke it out into this, and with these needing to be 1 across, we can see that load rating vehicle is empty here and load rating factor is empty here, even though these are essentially the same records. The last attribute manager will then populate the vehicle type for that load rating. And then once this is completed out, the load rating factor will be down here as well. And this will become 1 record and 1 inspection across the board instead of looking like 2. And then once that hits our Esri side of things, for those familiar, we will have our feature layer of bridges. This will be a related table, and it will be joined on the bridge ID. They'll be able to click on the bridge and see all the load ratings of the different aspects of the bridge. There can be anywhere from 6 to 26 inspection records for the load rating per bridge. So kind of a lot to maybe put in a database in the Esri side. So from an FME standpoint, we have to kind of think about our writer settings. Issue we run into a lot at the DOT is how do we clear out our SDE tables and put in new data without creating a ton of adds and deletes on the SQL side of Esri and really slowing down our system and needing more database maintenance. So one thing we're kind of wrapping our heads around at the moment is how to maintain this data in FME that is, I wouldn't say user friendly, but database friendly with SQL to get this new data in there. Luckily, I think just an update and insert is going to be pretty easy with this flow. So we're not clearing out 70,000 records and inserting 70,000 records, therefore creating 140,000 adds and deletes in the SQL side, which our IT managers would not be happy with. So, still a little work in progress here, but the main thing and the main issue to really get to this point was the API calls and really working through that pagination data. Maybe that was too quick of an explanation, maybe not, but if anyone wants me to go over anything deeper, feel free to ask away or put it in the group chat. Happy to answer all questions.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the presentation. You did a great job, and we know with API calls this can get pretty complex. So no, you did a great job showcasing the work that you've done so far. I just to comment, and I guess for you to follow up with, Jer, a lot of us who use FME, might have a basic knowledge of Python or coding in general, maybe writing some basic conditionals, but we tend to go to FME to simplify things, and there's a lot of users, throughout our FME groups that haven't really might not have that experience. Can you just talk about the I guess your background knowledge of any type of coding, and if that's helped you with this, or if there's any basic uh topics that someone who wants to get into doing more of these complex solutions, something that they might want to look into a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. My background in schooling and previous work experience, Python, JSON, Arcade, relatively basic, mostly in Pro, especially with Arcade and calculating fields, or in custom pop-ups in the map, creating different views, table views, custom pop-ups, all that using Arcade, or kind of the Esri provided Python environment. I would say I'm very much still learning the language side of things, especially Python. I could semi-read it. Writing it becomes a different challenge. That's where I love FME. It kind of does more of that for you, as long as you could kind of think in those terms. So, looking at a URL and seeing that, okay, we're hitting a secure website with a HTTPS. We are hitting our own internal, Bentley mainframe, doing an API call for the data type. These are object types and IDs given to me. So more or less, a lot of this is kind of just, see what fails and try to fix it. So it's a lot of just playing around with settings, and then it comes down to like the conditionals, like you said, and I even reached out to you and said, hey, not 100% sure on this. I know it's something you do. I know it's something we can do, but reading these different test conditionals and values where I'll call it like coding for the beginners that aren't quite intermediate yet. I had a former boss when talking about GIS users, know enough to be dangerous, which can cause a lot of issues. And that's where I feel like a lot of us GIS users, professionals, analysts can be sort of something like that to an IT professional that, can see what we're doing here and kind of freaks them out. Oh, why are we calling this API? What can this cause havocs with? But that's why I really do love FME, Esri, Jupyter notebooks, Python callers within FME, and Esri as well, where it gives you more of a hand holding way to utilize this language and architecture. So luckily I had some time to really train and utilize previous experience for some of this, where now I'm kind of in the, hey, you know enough to fix this issue. Can you read this? And I think that's where GIS has grown so much, is all of us are now kind of pseudo IT side of things, or like I know Ohio, you guys are in IT, or I'm looking at Georgia DOT IT manager, so you probably looking at this a little scared that we can do this as GIS people, not within IT. But this is where we're kind of falling. We're getting off those paper maps, off cartography, and really into database maintenance, server side, where we have to learn these different languages. And yeah, I'm not sure if that kind of answers your question, where that helps anyone at all.
No, that's great, Chair. We can see, in this workflow, along with all other workflows we've worked on, that it's FME has been a great tool to utilize, whether you do have that background in coding or in IT, or if you're on a beginner level, these are things that I could never have imagined that me and the people around me would be able to do without having, that piece of paper saying you have a degree in it. So very, very cool that you're able to show this off and know that it's something that is obtainable for us. I'll leave it open if anyone else has any questions. Feel free to put it in the chat, or you can go off mute. I don't know if Bo, you have anything you want to throw in.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
In fact, I think the Teague has a question, and his question was, what was the data source for bridge data again? I think it's asset-wise, Bentley's, but please, yeah, I think this is interest, yeah.
Yeah,
Inspector, okay.
no, you're right. Kind of all the above there with Bentley. So this is the website that we have with our internal kind of users, where we could go in and kind of test out different API calls and try to, create our own call that's really going to produce something useful in the end. I don't know if that's helping understand where this data is coming from. It's all the access I actually have to Inspect Tech is just through this API call here.
Okay, so Jeremy, let me ask you further on this Bentley data. Is the data hosted on your own, on-premise, or this is a cloud scenario hosted? Your data is hosted, whereby the only way you can access is via API.
Correct. Yep, we have API calls for us to the cloud in Aegis in IT, and then engineering does the same to pull in their inspection records and create those bridge load ratings. For this example, they do, a ton of other obvious developments that engineer uses, from concrete ratings to
Okay. So
lines. Yeah.
so in other words, you don't have direct database access, right?
No, I wish I did to help me understand this data a little bit better, other than just kind of looking through the FME flow and really trying to decipher what this data actually is coming out of here. But yeah, I don't have direct access to the database, unfortunately.
Okay. So my other question, I probably actually have quite a few and some other comments, is when you get data, does the original data you're getting from having like paging itself built into? Because I heard you mention about pagination, and but when you read it, it's possible it's also paged. Because when you get, it will not return 1 million records at a time, typically as 1,000 records, certainly is configurable at a time. So how do you know? How can you get all the pages? You have together. I still couldn't quite understand, wrap my brain around your approach. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, it took me a while too, because this is kind of my first foray in the pagination and all that, and I really I kind of reached out to our IT side, and they were a little bit bogged down with other projects that I kind of just dove in and see what I could do. And yeah, so this is our first HTTP caller here,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what we get with a response body saying, yes, it has the pages. This is your requesting page. It starts at 0 and has the next 100 records in it, or has a count of 100 and the next 100 records after, with the 72,000 remaining. So just based on this alone, I could tell that we have to make a lot of calls to this API to get this actual data that we want out, with all the fields there and the quotes. So from there, it's then extracting out the response body,
Right.
which is pretty much everything within that API call, and the requesting page as well, to get everything within that response body as well. So there's a lot of steps to kind of dive in. We get the total, we get the start, we get the remaining of, there's this many records. This is where it starts. Obviously, we start at 0. And this is how many are left after the first call. So some of this may be a little unnecessary as far as the data total, start, and remaining. We really are just worried about this requesting page, because then we clone, or so I guess, yeah, total does matter. We clone this call 1,000 times. So we're saying, divide this number by 1,000. This is how many copy numbers we get out. So we'll have obviously 73 or 72.
Okay. Right.
And then,
You make a call 1,000 times. Okay.
yep, yeah. So that page number, so if you go back to here, this page number is the start and continue. So the first kind of part of this response body, this right here, this requesting page. So then once we're able to kind of create that and grab that data, grab that paging number out of there, we come in here and say our start number is the value of that copy number times 1,000.
Okay, I see.
So if
And you
we're
make it,
on,
yeah.
if we're on copy number 1, the start number would be 1,000.
Okay.
And then
So
that
where do you make these subsequent HTTP called 1,000 of them? It's right over there.
is
Okay.
right in HTTP caller 4. So we have our keeper where kind of the only thing we really want to keep now after getting all the page numbers out of there is just this page itself.
Okay. That's cool. The reason I'm asking this, I think you're using a approach different from the approach we've been using. We've been using actually creating a custom transformer. Inside it is actually a loop. We have looping transformer to identify the page number, remaining numbers, remaining records, and it will just go through that. Yeah, you can specify specific page or pages. And I see the merit of yours as well, but creating a separate wrap that particular call in a looping kind of structure-based custom transformer will make your main page look much cleaner. So essentially, you still say, I get my records, then you just configure how many pages you want or all the pages you want, and it will just go ahead and grab it. So on your main page, essentially you're only having one custom transformer, so making more readable. You're embedding some of the complexities behind the custom transformer, but this is great. Using this approach to it's just new. It shows how FME really can be very flexible. Just like any mature language, you have more than one way. And this is especially so with FME. That's from my experiences. Yeah. So there's so many ways to skin a cat. If that sounds too cruel, I apologize. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's interesting.
When
And I
Matt
have
and I,
another, and I think another question is, I think perhaps more relevant to most audience is also related to Matthew's question. The traditional FME, that we're so used to, is just looking at the structured tables, right? Table and rows. And when it comes to the modern architecture, it does not have a defined schema, or the schema is defined in the dataset through JSON, through JSON format. I think that's one of the many of the jazz people, they probably, it's a little more foreign for them to deal with JSON format. I think that's one of the challenges possibly for people to get into the API called the paradigm, because API called paradigm, certainly you can deal with, you can ask it to return the payload in XML, but the majority of people are using just the JSON format. I think JSON format and JSON fragmenter and flattener and also JSON kind of like extracting those data, sometimes really difficult to understand and using FME. FME, yeah. So I think that's for me, each and every time I do it, I found myself, I need to look things up, and it just feel like it's not as intuitive. I don't know how you feel about, through your experience doing the fragmenters, flatteners, and JSON paths to identify things. You have any comments on that? Any suggestions as people try to venture into this API business?
yeah, the way I kind of started getting familiar with JSON was through webhooks and calling in survey 123s using FME and then writing it back to an SDE feature class or table, or Esri feature class or table. So the way I kind of got familiar with it was pulling out the JSON call from the survey 123 where it's hosted as JSON and bringing that into like a Notepad++, regular Notepad, online tools that convert JSON to text or anything like that, and kind of just getting familiar with the way it holds schema and tables and data, and kind of going about it that way. Yeah, I feel like FME does a great job at making some of us who are not as IT language, I'll call it, but language literate seem more literate than we probably actually are, just because it looks a little more familiar in this frame than looking at an actual long JSON string in a Notepad++. Um, and that's kind of where, like I was saying, where we are becoming IT literate as GIS people, and learning that, oh, this is actually how our data is stored in the background and not just given to us on the front end facing things. So yeah, it can seem scary. It can seem overwhelming when you're kind of first looking at it, but really just taking that time to sit with it, it does start to look familiar with all the data schemas and languages that we would be familiar with if you can kind of open your mind a little bit to reading it in a Word document versus like an attributed table.
And here, Bo, I'll speak on your comment from before about the custom transformers. That is something that I know Jeremy has looked into. And when we, had our call with Dave from FME, that was the recommendation. But, in Connecticut, we at the CTDOT, we are limited with our custom transformer use. With anything we want to put on FME flow or server, we can't use custom transformers. So I know this is, a little bit of a different way than what was recommended on how we were to use the API calls. But it is nice that in a software like FME, we are able to, find multiple paths to get, the same job done, even with our limitations.
Yeah, and to speak to that, and you mentioned loop and all, and different ways to do kind of API calls here in FME. Dave, when we first had the meeting, sent us over two forms, one for a loop with a known page number. So do we know how many records are actually in that API call? Or can we have the API call that we have no idea how many records we're actually pulling out and what that looks like? So he did suggest a loop, yeah, in the custom transformer. Our IT department has come back and said, yes, you can use custom transformers where they're kind of built out, right? Where, if we circled these up and then insert it into a custom transformer that way, we can now do that.
Okay.
But before we were told we couldn't do any sort of custom transformers, but now it's nice to have that, so we can kind of,
Yeah.
maybe clean this up a little bit, condense the way this looks, and go from there.
Excellent. Excellent. And I still have some questions, but I don't want to monopolize the time. So, anyone else? Yeah. I guess
So
nothing.
I think it's your floor. You can go ahead.
Okay. Okay. And I was just wondering, the so for that many of records, and how long does it take? I assume it's going to be rather slow. So what's the performance situation at this moment?
It's actually not as bad as you would think, especially once everything is cached. So, you know, I could run this. I added the sampler back for this presentation, but I have been running it to hit all 73,000 on the back end.
Mhm.
Or I guess the front end, depending how you look at it, but into the writer as we start to get closer to the writer side of things. But it's actually not that bad. Like I said, once it's cached, once the API call has kind of been initiated and it sits there with everything held, the performance does not take too long. It's kind of the initial, once I reopen this form,
Mhm.
say tomorrow morning, or in a week's time when I come back to this ask, that's when I have to sit here for, say, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour for this whole thing to kind of run to the end, and before I can kind of start to look at end numbers and end ideas of writing into the SDE.
So about 30 minutes or something. Okay.
Yeah, it's not that bad. I can
Mhm.
run this in the background and go do,
Mhm.
one of the other asks I have.
Yeah. And yeah. My other question is, well, perhaps a comment, because you mentioned about the retrieval of data has duplicate records, two different rows identifying different properties or different attributes of concerns. You had to merge them in a sense. I was thinking in that scenario, using JSON and all those cryptic ways was help coming from Matthew to get business conversions, what have you. It's also potentially possible you separate them into two different streams and having two different tables, then they can join them by the key. That will be potentially being cleaner, easier to maintain rather than all the logic is hidden behind those attribute managers. So it's just my comment because we're talking about the first row and second row having the same key. If you separate them out into two different data streams and join them, perhaps it's easier, more intuitive, and easier to maintain.
I am going to write that one down. Thank you, Bo.
Okay. And one other thing, speaking of, I'm just interjecting with our experience in the context of roads and highway, because I think many of the DOTs, they are implementing roads and highway, and Connecticut DOT is a aberration at this moment, and perhaps some point you will be converted as well. I'm not suggesting you should be converted, okay? And so the way that one of the things we could do using FME as a good application use case is roads and highway server. Uh, it has many important informational pieces there, defining the columns of each and every layers, like event layers or your network layers. Because it's possible in an agency, they have different names for the from measure and to measure and from begin date and end date, or even the route ID from different one if they are not consistent. But how do you still do FME the traditional way that typically you have to hard code, say, I'm reading this layer, I'm having this route ID as the route ID or having from measure to measure. But if you're reading multiple records, some of the multiple layers, some of the layers, they might have different name, the column names even. So in that situation, using a API call to the server, you can get the metadata about each and every layers if they happen to be different. And so in West Virginia, we are using this API call to get to roads and highway server to get metadata and some other important information so we can avoid hard coding in any ways we can. Yeah, hard coding making it really difficult to maintain, or changes will break your system. So that's one other example I just like to share. But API is really cool. Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
we
always the future.
have a kind of, I want to call it similar form, but we have a form that does connect directly to the back end of Bentley and our Exor side to extract the LRS data and bring that into our Esri environment. So kind of still holds the same topology that a roads and highways or a utility network, if you will kind of force within Pro. So, XOR is very good at doing that, and then extracting that out from there, it kind of holds those same rules and attribute rules and events, and while just bringing it in as simple layers into our enterprise GIS environment.
Okay, great. And Matthew, have any other
No, I think I am good from here. Jeremy, thank you for presenting and answering questions. It's a great way to showcase, the work that we're doing here. I just want to say thank you to everyone else too for coming in and listening. And I know hopefully we can continue this going and keep our participation up, and continue to grow the FME or the FME-T group.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So to wrap up real quickly, GIS presence. At the moment, we have reached out to the RHOG. RHOG has a FME subgroup, and I reach out to them, and perhaps we are looking to team up with them to have a SIG meeting in the upcoming GIST, which will be in Georgia, right, in Teague's backyard, and yeah, and this year because of resource constraint, we are not going to do FME workshop, but we're thinking about in the future we'll continue to host FME workshop because it is just in this day and age, and doing GIS and doing data, FME, it's the importance is more and more important as we are in the age of more heterogeneous databases and many of the API databases. So FME's capacity, its utility is more pronounced than ever before. So I think there's reason to provide more initial lift or education or help and learning opportunity at GIST. So we're committed in the future. We'll put on this workshop on a continuing basis. Okay, and next event, it's kind of close to the GIST, so we decided to cancel that out. Of course, if anyone has a good topic to talk about, that'll be great. And I have a few myself that I can talk, but talking about West Virginia specific experiences, we have quite a few, and also have more generic, more technique oriented, rather than a particular project oriented kind of topics. My last one was talking about how to do defensive FME, because the data is oftentimes dirty. If you do not anticipate the data issue, and your system just won't, it's not going to be robust enough, and how many ways you can be more defensive. So that type of series, I'm kind of still interested, and but didn't really get much interest. So I'm kind of thinking about possibly into more use case based. So we'll be more focused on use case based, and I can put on a few in the future. But my real intention is to diversify the speaker. I know Georgia, for example, also doing FME, and Oklahoma is also delving into that. Certainly Louisiana. So if anyone that other people using FME, and please share with us, and then we can reach out to invite them to be our guest speakers to present. And also as a plugin, that FME are safe, and myself and Dave Campanas and myself, our proposal for GISC presentation is on a incomplete DOT survey on FME usage in roads and highway. Associate our FME usage along with the roads and highway stuff. So we will have a talk on that. And so it's a pre-advertisement. We don't have the date yet, but we know that particular abstract has been accepted. So with that, yeah, if you don't have anything, then thank you everyone, and we'll see you most likely in a GIST.